Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here uh, on this Sunday the 12th, January 2024. Thank you for tuning in. What's going on out there in the world? The fires. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Now, I grew up down in Florida. I'm telling you, I was in one hell of a fire when I was a kid. We had a 20-mile bus drive from my school. It was way out in the woods. It was in a town called Umatilla, Florida, the school. And they bused me about 20 miles down an old road. It was twisty and turny through the woods, home. So one afternoon I was at school and I looked off in the distance. I saw this fire, a brush fire. Very similar to these, and it was a big fire. It was at the time, I think it was 20,000 acres or something. It was big. I didn't know that. I saw the flames and fire, and you can see them from quite a distance. Uh, so they took off with the bus, heading toward home. And when they got about 4 miles from where my home is, on the road, the twisty road, they run into the fire, and the police were there, and they're stopping people from coming in. So they stopped the bus full of kids. And the fire was contained on one side of the road. They were trying to contain it and use the highway to contain the fire. And it was on a 3 mile front, about maybe 3 miles, I guess. 2 or 3 miles was the length of the front, but it was on one side of the road. It burned right up to the road. And they thought they had it contained. The police officers, they got on the radio and they detained our bus there for about, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. Then the police officer come up and talked to the bus driver, and he said the fire's been contained on this side of the highway. I think it's okay now to let traffic go through. So I let the bus go through, and just then, when we were in the middle of the fire zone, an enormous wind whipped up, and the fire decided to jump the highway. It's quite seriously. It started to jump the highway in front of the bus, and it was then crackling into the woods on the other side of the highway. Uh, and the bus driver had to come to a stop while the fire was roaring across in front of him. Then what happened was the fire started to come at the bus, like it was coming at the bus in the woods. It was still in the woods, but you could hear it crackling and coming toward the bus on that side, coming right toward the bus. And behind us, it started to cross the road. And it was coming toward us in the woods. And the bus driver realized that the fire was going to cross the road right where the bus was in about 2 minutes. you know? In other words, burn the bus to pieces. So you know what he did? He said, "You kids all get on board there." And he said, "Shut those windows up. Shut them all up." And I hear the windows shutting up in the bus. And he said, "Here we go." And he hit the pedal on that bus. You never seen a bus go so fast. And what he did was he roared right through the section where the fire was crossing the road. The flames were going right across the road. He roared the bus right through that. And it was about I don't know. He had the bus going so fast, it didn't last long. It was like zoom right through the flames were touching the sides of the bus. But he was going so fast that he went right through that section in no time. And the bus got hot on board. It did. It got hot inside the bus, but it went right through that and come out the other side. Well, now the fire was behind us. We passed through it. And then the kids could open the windows of the bus. That cool air was coming in. Man, it got hot inside that bus. It must have got up to 120 degrees in there. And then when we got on the other side, we could all open the windows, and it was nice again, and then we got home. And when we got home, the fire was only a mile or 2 miles away from my house. Now, what I was telling you about this story, as I'm trying to explain to you guys, is that was during the daytime. The wind was pushing the fire. That night, what happened was the wind died down, and the fire started to spread out in all different directions. because there's not much wind, just very light winds, and it was the winds that were there that night were not in any one particular direction. They were blowing this way and that way and every which way, and they just spread the fire out. And that's what's happening right now. These fires in California right now are spreading. They're spreading out, right? And they're getting ready. The worst is yet to come. Tuesday, we got an enormous wind coming into this region. So now we got these fires that have spread out on wider base. They're on a wider base than they were before when the big winds hit. When the big winds hit, we could be facing the worst of the situation on Tuesday. We're going to have to wait and see. But, 48 hours from now, these fires could be at their very worst. But it's a terrible situation. My heart goes out to all those families out and all the people who have lost. They've lost not just their homes, but some people have lost their lives in this. Quite a few, and the death toll is climbing. Now, to switch subjects. What about Canada? You remember Trump said that he wants Canada and he wants Greenland and he wants he wants the Panama Canal. Well, it says here that there's American troops already stationed inside Canada. It says, are there U.S. military bases and American troops in Canada? The answer is yes. But it's only 156 active duty members in the United States that are deployed in Canada right now. It says, why are these troops in Canada? It says 50 of them are members of the U.S. Air Force who serve alongside Canadian bases in North Bay, Ontario, and Winnipeg as part of the NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. So there are troops in Canada. I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't take these things lightly. Because I tried to explain, a lot of people are just fluffing it off and saying, oh, this was this talk, it's just Trump talking or whatever. But no, I've tried to explain where this new route for world trade is opening up in the Arctic right now. And all these countries want to get a handle on this because normally their ships have to go 12,000 miles, and they can do it in 7 if they go through the Arctic. It's almost cutting shipping in half. Because that's your big cost, is how many miles does you have to ship whatever it is. And they didn't have this available to them a few years ago when the ice was too thick. Now that the ice is getting thinner in the Arctic, they can break it with icebreakers and they can open this route for world trade. And they all want to get a piece of this pie. And Canada's got the biggest piece of the pie. And up through Greenland. And that's where the route would be. Now you know what's going on and why it's very important for security. Just like Trump says, security, very important that they maintain that control. It's all about control. This is how they've kept the global currency standard in place, is by going after things that will give them that control. And this will give them control. This is one of the things that could help keep the global standard as the world reserve currency as the dollar, rather than some other currency. And it's a big fight right now for who's going to maintain control. And this is what these wars are all about. And these wars, what you'll find is they in the effort to vie for this control and these wars that are starting, they command, what's the word I'm looking for? These wars command the, trying to think of the word. They're more important to them than anything else. They will, if it's important to their war effort or them maintaining control or whatever, they will do things that seem unusual in the world that we grew up in. Like, in order to win the war, they'll do. And we're in wartime right now. This has changed. See, everything's changed. Around 2020, when that virus came in, the world's changed. We're in a changed world right now. And a lot of people are thinking it's still like the old world we used to have. It's not. This is a world at war now at this point. The world is on a war footing. And I wish that they would get off of this and just quit it, because it's silliness, it's nonsense. It just talk about use up the world's resources. Now Trump is thing about Trump is people are expecting him. Take a look at the U.S. dollar index just for a minute. Look how high this is riding. Why is it riding so high? 109.64. Why is the dollar riding so high? Because they're thinking, hey, the popular thinking is when the Democrats get in, the Democrats spend, and they think, well, the Republicans get in, and they're going to balance the budget and everything else. You got it backwards. The last 4 years of this last administration that was in, they were the ones who were trying to pinch pennies and raising interest rates and doing quantitative tightening into the economy and being tight. It was when the last administration went out, they were in a spending spree. And this last administration that was in cut that spending spree right in half and has tightened everything. They've tightened all the screws. You got it all wrong. The Democrats are the tight. They're tight with the money. And it's the Republicans that spend like a drunken sailor. And so the dollar, they've got this wrong. So I think what you're seeing here is a look. First thing Trump's talking about right now, he's not even in office yet. And he's saying, okay, we got to lower interest rates quickly. They're going to spend money in all these things, like wars. Oh my gosh, the amount of money Trump's going to spend on wars. What is he going to do? Buy Greenland? I mean, the amount of money that's going to be spent in the next 4 years is going to be off the charts. And all these tariffs they're going to put in? Oh, watch the inflation. Oh my gosh, and this is going to be the most inflationary 4 years that you've ever seen in your life. And it's very difficult to maintain the U.S. dollar standard without control. So if you got control, you can maintain it. And control can come in different forms. It can be military power that it can exert control. It can be power over shipping. You got the say of who passes through your shipping channel. That cuts off 5,000 miles off of their shipping routes. And you can say who goes through and who doesn't. That's control. That kind of control. Control over the financial system. The SWIFT system. It's all about control. The world reserve currency status is all about control. It's all about maintaining control. And so this is what I'm trying to tell you guys, explain to you that this new trade route opening up, they're all just rubbing their hands together, vying for who's going to have, in the world right now, who's going to have control over this new shipping route. It's like a gold rush for them. And it goes right, that new shipping route goes right through Canada and Greenland. And now, that's what's going to happen. And they're not going to let go of that. It's too important. They're going to keep fighting for it. They're going to fight for control over that, because that's the big one coming up. That's all world shipping, control over world shipping. Okay, let's get back and take a look. Ukraine, it says it's captured 2 North Korean soldiers in Russia's Kursk region. Boy, gosh, that's a tricky situation. Because they're not even supposed... Are they even... Like, North Korea... This is a war between Russia and Ukraine. And to capture North Korean soldiers, North Korea has drawn itself into this war. And this is very unusual, having 2 North Korean soldiers in captivity in Ukraine. This is Another bizarre situation. Uh, Now, moving on, we see that NATO is sending 2 ships to guard the Baltic Sea infrastructure. Now, I was talking about this a lot a week or two ago, how these cables are so vulnerable. The undersea cables that carry all of our internet and provide a good, well, 98% of our internet. You know, okay, Starlink carries some, but they're only carrying just like a small, very small. So I know that over the upcoming period, like in the next, maybe probably the next 10 years, the amount of internet that's carried by space-based telecommunications is probably going to increase to a higher percentage. It's going to go up from like 1% to 2% of the internet and 3%. The first thing you know, they'll be carrying 10% of the internet, and later they'll probably be carrying all of it. But as of now, they're only carrying a very small, little, tiny percentage of the internet traffic. And most of the internet traffic's being carried by these big undersea cables that are in the ocean. And so they're sending these 2 ships to guard Baltic Sea infrastructure from Russian hybrid warfare. In other words, they don't want the Russians to try to slice their cables open. But I'm going to tell you what, this is very hard to do because line of sight on the ocean, you can only see about 15 miles. So you got this ship that's supposed to guard the cables. They can only guard about 25 miles or something of cable at one time because it's further than they can even. And they got to get there too. So say they're here and they're guarding the cable for this 25-mile area, and they're over there 200 miles away cutting the cable. You got to sail over to where they're at. That's going to take time. The ships, what's the speed that a ship can sail at? About what, 30 knots or something? 30 miles an hour, so 10 hours to go 300 miles. Is that about right? Am I about right on that? I'm just guessing, by the way, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm about right. That would be really good for a ship to make that kind of distance that fast, you know? But still, like, it wouldn't take them 10 hours to cut the cable. So while they're sailing en route, and maybe they know the cable's being cut over there and they're over here. You know, it's like a game of whack-a-mole trying to protect these cables. You know, is what I would think. Uh, but these fiber optic cables were damaged by a dragging anchor. They think that it was possibly intentional. I don't know. Uh, but the real intentional cutting of the cables probably wouldn't be done with an anchor. It would probably be done with a submarine or something, or a submersible, or divers. These are very big vulnerability because there's a network of these cables, and if they were to cut too many of these cables at once, the internet would go dead, and it wouldn't come back on until they get the cables restored. And how long would that take? That is these questions I'm asking. Now, taking a look at the financials today, we see silver at $30.36. It's up 27 cents on the week. Uh, so it's back up a little bit again. It's back up above $29. You know, it's not in the 20s anymore. I'm surprised it fell down that low, to tell you the truth, considering what it takes now to get an ounce of silver out of the ground. $30 is what buying power is $30 got? Well, I'll tell you what. Our $100 bill right now, going back to 1930, roughly 100, almost 100 years, not quite 100 years. U.S. We're talking U.S. A dollar had a lot more purchasing power. $100 now has $4.25 purchasing power. That's what's got $4.25 purchasing power. $100 right now. From 1930 till now. So, you know, silver you could buy with $100. You can buy about 3 ounces, more or less, maybe a little bit less. Uh, So divide that into $4.25, and we're only talking about what was it, a dollar. Trying to figure $4.25 and divide it by 3. So in other words, you could buy 3 ounces of silver for $4.25 in 1930. That's the equivalent of price to what it is right there. And I mean, because you can't buy nothing now with $30. And do you realize I have to mine like 400 pounds of ore and crush it down to powder and sift it through with chemicals and everything else and do smelting processes and everything? It's I'm telling you, it's probably well over $20 cost, and they're getting 30 for the product. So this is not a whole big deal of profit margin. Look, a guy was on last night. I was watching him, and he held up a brand new iPhone. And he says, anybody out there can tell me how much it costs to manufacture this iPhone in China or wherever they're manufacturing it? I want you to guess in the audience. And the first guy to guess, he said, I think it costs about $300 to manufacture that iPhone. Now, I was sitting here listening to that on the thing, and I put in a guess. And I was guessing $15. So the next guy guessed. And he says, oh, I think it costs $100 to manufacture the iPhone. Another guy guessed, and he says, well, $99. You know? And the guy, he come up and he said, well, the true price to manufacture this iPhone is $10. So look at the profit margin they're making on iPhones. If it's only costing them $10 to manufacture it, and they're charging you what for the latest iPhone? What do you pay for the latest iPhone? I haven't kept up. I know they're awfully pricey. Okay, so they're making a huge profit margin. There's silver in those iPhones. The silver people who are producing the silver are not making that kind of profit margin. I'll tell you that. Now, let's take a look at cryptocurrency today. We're looking at Bitcoin at 94,982, which is absolutely astounding considering what the Bitcoin is. What is it? It's a computer algorithm. That's all it is. It's a computer algorithm. It's a new novel type of computer algorithm that can solve the Byzantine general's problem, but it's still nothing more than a computer algorithm. But nevertheless, $94,000 for it. And there's still no real solid use cases for people buy Bitcoin. They don't buy them to spend as a currency. At least I don't. Most of them buy it as a savings. And it's very limited where you can spend it. Very limited indeed. Uh, but they hope for the future. They hope for a day when Bitcoin will be an actual currency that's used. Well, it's been around since 2009. That's never really happened. But these currencies that are being used as currencies, like the US dollar, for instance, the only reason Bitcoin is worth $94,000 is because the US dollar is on such shaky, all these currencies are on such shaky ground. Everybody knows that it's a Ponzi scheme, and they're going to keep printing them until they're worthless. So you're waiting for that day when society itself will actually catch on and say, oh my goodness, we cannot save in these dollars. Let's spend them as fast as we can spend them, because 2 months from now, they're not going to be worth as much as they're worth today. And if all these currencies blow up into a hyperinflation, then out of desperation, people might start using alternatives. Cryptocurrency could be an alternative, and so could the precious metals. But the government, they got a lot of twists and turns up their sleeve. And when a currency goes bad in a hyperinflation, what they do is just create a new reset. They reset the whole thing, create a new currency that takes quite a long time to hyperinflate again. They just, like in Germany, they still use the euro. It's a replacement for the old mark, German mark. But the mark went up in flames back during the Weimar hyperinflation. It just was destroyed in hyperinflation. Well, so will the euro, ultimately. What'll they do? They'll bring along something else. People think, oh, they're going to use Bitcoin. They're not going to use that because it's not under their control. They can't print as many as they want. It's a fair system. They want an unfair system. They got an unfair system now. If it blows up, they're going to try to replace it with another unfair system. They don't want a fair system. They don't want fair money. Bitcoin's fair money. It's real. It's the real McCoy. It's fair. It's a fair system. It's engineered to be fair. You can't cheat. Believe me, they've tried to try. Look, there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin sitting out there that they would like to do something with, but they've had years, since 2009 until now, they've had to try to cheat this system, and nobody's been as successful at cheating at it. That's why a lot of them don't like it. A lot of these big, real rich people out there, they hate the stuff because they can't cheat. It doesn't let them cheat. Take a look now at the U.S. Finance and Yahoo Finance we got here. Taking a look at the markets. The Dow's lost quite a little bit over the week. It's closed at 41,938. And the S&P is 58.27. And they're both down over the week. Crude oil finished at 76.57. Finished the week. Gold is at 27.17 over the week. See, crude oil's going up a little bit. I'm going to see it at the pump. And it could go up a hell of a lot more. Depending on how the world twists and turns in the wind right now. Everything's kind of twisting and turning in the wind. We just don't know how all this is going to pan out. I'm thinking, when I'm talking about that to you guys, I'm thinking about the war over in the Middle East and how that could cut off the oil supply. Taking a look now at the bonds, and we're seeing climbing yields. U.S. 30 years at 4.95. It's up 3 basis points, and the U.S. 10 years at 4.76, and it's up 8.2 basis points. So we're seeing a slow rise in U.S. Treasuries here. And there's still a little bit of a yield curve inversion. But man, there's not a whole lot of difference between the whole spread. They're all four. I just see fours down the line, except for the U.S. 20 year at 5%. But all just fours all the way down the line, all the way from 1 month all the way out to 30 year. They're all at 4%. They're all in the 4% range. That's very unusual. Dollar index today, 109.64. Listen, thank you guys for listening to my show. Appreciate my audience out there. You guys have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll catch you guys very soon. Bye-bye.